Everyone knows Sony's PlayStation Vita, their powerful little handheld device. Well, as of last week in North America, everyone can now buy a PlayStation TV, which is essentially a PlayStation Vita in this compact format without a screen or controls. Essentially, you hook it up to your television, and you can sync it up with a DualShock 3 or a DualShock 4, play Vita games, PSP games, PS1 classics, but you can also stream video from your PlayStation 4 in one room to a PlayStation TV in another room. Now, those are a lot of promising features, but the real question is, how well does it work?
It turns out, nearly every aspect of the PlayStation TV has limitations that may catch you off guard. It's not that the PlayStation TV doesn't do what it claims, but it doesn't do it as well as you expect. First and foremost, the PlayStation TV is ostensibly a Vita that's traded in its battery, display, touch capabilities, and controls for HDMI and wireless controller connectivity. It still utilizes Vita cartridges and memory cards, and thankfully, existing Vita owners can move their memory card to the PlayStation TV and retain all of their installed apps and games. It outputs video over HDMI at 480p, 720p, and 1080i. And if you crave faster than wireless internet connectivity, there's an Ethernet port at the ready. When it comes to game support, there's a decent selection of Vita games that work flawlessly, but obviously, without support for true touch-based controls, there are limitations. It's not all bad. Sony implemented a fair solution for dealing with slower-paced games that use touch controls from menus and things like that. When playing Vita games with either of the supported controllers, be it a DualShock 3 or 4, L3 or R3 will activate a cursor that can be controlled with the corresponding analog stick and shoulder buttons. The system works as intended, but it's cumbersome at best, and alas, the DualShock 4's touchpad is left unused. Of course, not every Vita game relies on touch controls, so it's not totally damning that the PS TV isn't mature enough to account for those titles. There are currently over 140 Vita games that are supported, not counting PSP, PS1 classics, PlayStation Minis, and PlayStation mobile games. If you count those libraries, then the number adds up to roughly 700 games. Currently, compatibility is dictated by a whitelist that's defined by Sony, which means that future titles, retail or downloadable, may not be supported without a firmware update. Also, just because a game doesn't rely on touch controls, such as Metal Gear Solid HD Collection, there's still a chance that it won't work on the PlayStation TV. Given the discrepancy in controls, it's understandable why not all Vita games might work, but it's not immediately clear why there isn't support for the entire library of downloadable PS1 classics and PSP games. Both of these supported controllers have the necessary inputs. Some games that work in the Vita, like the PSP game Castlevania: The Dracula X Chronicles, just aren't supported. Hopefully, Sony can patch these gaps in support in the near future. When it comes to support for non-gaming apps, there's one app that isn't supported by the PlayStation TV, which absolutely should be: Netflix. Even if you've never used the app on your Vita, if you have a PlayStation TV connected to your monitor in lieu of a console, streaming video would be a great pillar of support for this little device. Your only video options at the moment include Crunchyroll, Crackle, and Sony's Video Unlimited service. If you're transferring existing Vita content to the PlayStation TV, then you're more than likely to find games that don't work. If, however, you're starting from scratch, Sony has built a special version of the PlayStation Network Store for PlayStation TV that only displays supported content. Using remote play with the PlayStation 4 is a big selling point for the PlayStation TV that will no doubt entice a lot of PlayStation 4 owners. The promise of being able to play games in one room while your PlayStation 4 is in another sounds great, but for one reason or another, be it Sony's video compression methodology or network limitations, there's always a noticeable amount of latency to contend with. It doesn't matter if you're communicating over a wireless network or plugged right into the router. Remote play works, but there's noticeable lag and latency issues that'll make it unfeasible to play competitive games at a competitive level. Unfortunately, we can only recommend remote play via the PlayStation TV for slower paced games that don't require twitch precision. The PlayStation TV has a lot of potential, but it's obvious that Sony still has a lot of work to do. Remote play is only viable for some types of games, and there are plenty of games that should work from the Vita, PSP, and PS1 libraries that are inexplicably unsupported. At least the games that are natively supported do play really well, with the exception of some Vita games that use the PlayStation TV's emulated touch controls, which are pretty cumbersome in practice. Lastly, Sony needs to make sure that video apps such as Netflix actually work, because there's no technical reason why they shouldn't. At this point, it feels like the PlayStation TV came out too soon, and its software could have benefited from a few extra months of development.